Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Text 12. Tatradadana munayo jnanavairagya yuktaya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. Tatradadana munayo jnanavairagya yuktaya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. Tatradadana munayo jnanavairagya yuktaya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. Others can chant.
Hare Krishna. Tada Shraddhadhana Munayo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pashyanti Atmani Chatmanam Bhaktya Shruta Grahitaya.
Tatradadana munayo jnanavairagya yuktaya pashyantya atmani atmanam bhaktya shruta griyataya.
Hare Krishna. Tatshradadhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pasyante atmani chatmanam bhaktya sruta grihitaya. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Tatshraddhanaya munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pasyanti atmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. Hare Krishna.
Tatshraddhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya.
Tatradhanaya munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya vashantatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya.
Tatshraddhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya.
Hare Krishna. Tatshraddhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyanti atmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
That's it. Very nice chanting, everybody. Word for word translation. Tat, that. Shraddhadana, seriously inquisitive. Munaya, sages. Jnana, knowledge. Vairagya, detachment. Yuktaya, well equipped with. Pashyanti, see. Atmani, within himself. Cha, and. Atmanam, the Paramatma. Bhaktya, in devotional service. Shruta, the Vedas. Grihitaya, well received. Translation. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. This is a Slightly long purport. The absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord, Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead, who is the full-fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence, and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is but a partial realization. There are four different types of human beings: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialistic, whereas the other three are transcendental. The first class transcendentalists are the devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. The second class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the Absolute Person. And the third class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the Absolute Person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from material association. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by knowledge and detachment from material association. As Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the absolute truth, so the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, i.e., the paths of jnana and yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge combined with detachment from material association, and which is fixed by the oral reception of the Vedanta Shruti, is the only perfect method by which the seriously inquisitive student can realize the absolute truth. Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentalists. There are three classes of devotees, namely, first, second, and third class. The third class devotees, or the neophytes who have no knowledge and are not detached from material association, but who are simply attracted by the preliminary process of worshiping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definite progress from the position of material devotional service to the second class devotional position. In the second class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely, the personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of a second class devotee and thus become eligible to know the absolute truth. A third class devotee, therefore, has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative sources of Bhagavata. The number one Bhagavata is the established personality of devotee, and the other Bhagavatam is the message of Godhead. The third class devotee, therefore, has to go to the personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality of devotee is not a professional man who earns his livelihood by the business of Bhagavatam. Such a devotee must be a representative of Shukadev Goswami, like Sutta Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for the all-around benefit of all people. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from the professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing. So one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy message of Godhead, as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, are undoubtedly transcendental subjects. But even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from the professional man who spoils them, as the serpent spoils milk simply by the touch of his tongue. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literature, like the Upanishads, Vedanta, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, or Panchayat authorities, the make show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as, an unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such messages from the Vedic literatures, one can see the all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. This is called samadhi. Tatradana munaya jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyantatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunnivari Paschata Deshatarine. This second chapter is awesome and amazing, and this is also a really great verse, great segment of the Bhagavatam to be dealing with. So in this chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service, at the very beginning of that chapter, in his first commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this second chapter is specifically dealing with 3 items. The first item it discusses is abhideya, which is the process of spiritual realization. The second topic dealt with is the goal of that realization, prayojanam. And the third topic is the object of that worship, the object of that process, who is Bhagavan Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These are the 3. He's summarizing the 3 basic topics, the abhideya, prayojanam, and the goal of worship. And if we look at yesterday's verse, Friday's verse, Vedanti tat tattva vidhas, that's a beautiful and concise summary of the object of worship. That object, of course, is the supreme absolute truth, which is realized, which is one. The supreme truth is only one, but according to the vision of the worshippers, is realized in 3 ways, as Bhagavan, Paramatma, and Brahman. So that's Friday's verse, Vedante tat tattva vidhas tattvamyaj jnanam avyayam. And today's verse is describing, or starting to describe, abhideya, the actual process of realizing that supreme absolute truth. And this verse gives some important guidelines for how this process is done and the qualifications of the seeker in that process. So the qualities of the performance of bhakti and the qualities of the practitioner of bhakti. So first quality in the first line, Tatshradadana Munaya, that the practitioner of this process must be Shradadana. Now it's very interesting. Prabhupada translates Shradadana as seriously inquisitive. Shradadana Munayo, a seriously inquisitive sage. Now this word Shraddha is usually translated as faith, like Ado Shraddha, first one must have faith. Prabhupada translates it as seriously inquisitive, and this is a very important point, that Shraddha is not, this word faith, in English, faith means that you accept something blindly, you don't understand it, you don't have evidence, you don't have proof, but you accept it. So this is not actually what the process of Shraddha is in Vedic understanding and in the process of bhakti. So Shraddha is a much more richer and much more nuanced term than that kind of blind faith, like we say in English. Prabhupada would discuss this, mention this many times, just like Prabhupada. He was in London giving class and he was discussing Srila Rupa Goswami's verse, Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha. And he says about Shraddha, he says, yes, first thing is Shraddha. Just like you are asking questions. Shraddha, faith. Just like anyone who is coming to us, he has got some little faith, but that is the beginning, Ado Shraddha. Shraddha means, quote, it is very nice. Krishna conscious movement is very nice. Let us try to understand what it is, unquote. That is called Shraddha. So Shraddha is not just blind acceptance. Shraddha means, let me try to understand deeply what this process of Krishna consciousness is. Shraddha Munio, the inquisitive sage who is diving deeply into the philosophy and the process of and the meaning of devotional service. This is Shraddha, not just unquestioning acceptance or blind acceptance. Shraddha means faith in the sense that you have a willingness to dive into and investigate this process of devotional service. So faith is there even in the ordinary sense, faith, even in the ordinary meaning of the word faith in English, is there that we have to at least theoretically accept that Krishna consciousness is the process by which we can attain the goal of life and realization of the supreme absolute truth. But from that start means there has to be questioning, there has to be philosophy, there has to be diving deep, studying. Prabhupada said studying threadbare, examining the philosophy threadbare, meaning really unpacking it and taking it apart and diving into it. But definitely not just blind acceptance. Blind acceptance rather is condemned often by Srila Prabhupada. The real process of faith is just like in this chapter and the previous chapter, the sages at Naimisharanya, they have faith that Sutta Goswami can deliver them the right knowledge and answer their questions. And therefore they ask these deep probing questions, these 6 questions, which are so deep and philosophical and meaningful, and are actually the basis for the whole expansion of the whole 12 cantos of the Bhagavatam. So not blind acceptance, but this deep philosophical inquisitiveness. This is the actual Shraddha. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj says that Sri Krishna Chaitanya Daya Karaha Vichar. He says, if you're actually interested in logic and philosophy and argument and all these things, Vichar, then Vichar Karile Chitte Pabe Chamatkar, then you should turn that philosophical inquiry to the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chamatkar, you will find it amazing and wonderful. Strikingly wonderful is the words he used. If you turn this inquiry, this Shraddha, not blind acceptance, but inquiry into the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you'll be amazed by the depth of it. This is the kind of Shraddha we should be cultivating. Because blind faith, blind acceptance, if it's blind, you may accept Krishna consciousness, or if it's blind, you may accept something else, or you may accept something else, or today you'll accept something and tomorrow you'll accept something different. Because it's blind, it has no guidance, it has no depth. So we need this actual Shraddha. This is the Shraddha Dana Munaya. In the purport, Prabhupada mentions the different kinds of devotees, the different stages of devotees. First, he mentions the different stages of all people, karmis, jnanis, yogis, and devotees. And immediately he rejects the karmis. The karmis are simply materialistic. It means karma means they're just doing some material activities and looking for material results. But the others are transcendental, at least in the sense that their goal is transcendental. The jnanis are after Brahman, The yogis are after Paramatma, and the devotees are after Bhagavan, which, as we heard in the previous verse, are all aspects of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So they're all transcendental. But among them, the devotees are the best because they're going for Bhagavan. And then amongst the devotees, Prabhupada further classifies that there's first class, second class, third class. And for that analysis, he uses the analysis given in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, that there are materialistic devotees who are simply, they're performing devotional service because they're attracted to the deities, they're attracted to the rituals, but they're materialistic in nature. Then the second class devotees are, they're able to discriminate who is Bhagavan and how do we give our love to him. Who are the devotees and how do we make friends with them? Who are the innocent and how do we preach to them? And who are the demonic and how do we avoid them? And then there's the topmost devotees of all who see Krishna everywhere. But there's another classification of first, second, and third class devotees given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And this is a classification based on Shraddha, based on faith, and based on understanding. And there Srila Rupa Goswami describes that devotees are qualified for devotional service on the base of their faith and understanding. Ado Shraddha, because Ado Shraddha, it begins with Shraddha. Therefore, the least qualified devotees, their faith is very weak, and their understanding is also very weak. Because their understanding is weak, they can't offer very good arguments, they can't delve into the philosophy very deeply. And because their faith is weak, if someone argues with them, they may give up devotional service. Or if they're attracted by material life, they may give up devotional service because their faith and their knowledge are weak. Then there's the second class devotees, the Madhyama Adhikaris, who are more qualified to take up the process of pure devotional service. And their qualification is that their faith, their belief, their acceptance is very strong. No matter what, they will not give up their adherence to devotional service. But their understanding may not be very deep. And their logic and reasoning and ability to discuss devotional service may also not be very strong. So because their faith is strong, their belief is strong, and their adherence is strong, they won't give up devotional service under any circumstances. But they may not be able to argue the philosophy very well. They may not be able to convince others of the philosophy very well. But because their faith is strong, they'll stick to devotional service and they'll advance. And of the devotees who are qualified to take up devotional service, the most qualified are the Uttama Adhikaris. Their faith is very strong, and under no circumstances will they ever give up devotional service. But their logic and understanding and powers of reasoning and depth of understanding of devotional service is also very strong. Therefore, not only will they not give up devotional service, but they'll be able to understand it deeply, and they'll be able to also preach and convince others of the power and efficacy of devotional service. And if someone argues against them, they'll be able to defend the qualification of devotional service to others. So this is real Shraddha. When not just the belief, the faith or belief is strong, but the depth of understanding and reasoning and logic and argument and all of these things are also very strong. This is the actual Shraddhadana Munayo, who is really qualified to take up devotional service. Vichara karile chitta pabe chamatkara. And when someone attains that kind of qualification, then they'll find the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so wonderful, so amazing. So this kind of faith is very good. This kind of not blind faith, but deep understanding. Not just parroting the words of devotional service or the beliefs of devotional service, but a deep understanding. Prabhupada says, but faith should not be blind. Blind faith is useless. Now we have already discussed that one should go to the spiritual master with surrender and question and service. 3 things. First of all, for acquiring knowledge, we have to find out the suitable personality. And if we are fortunate enough to find out such a suitable personality, then first thing is to surrender. And that after that surrender, there are questions. One must be very intelligent to put questions to the spiritual master. Without questions, you cannot make progress. So not just finding a guru, not just finding Bhagavatam, not just finding devotional service, but applying questions. And in the purport to Bhagavatam for whatever the verse is, Tadvidi pranipratena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te gyanam gyaninas tattvadarshina. About the importance of approaching a qualified guru, Prabhupada says in the purport, in this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. So blind following, blind faith is rejected. And also, in the name of being philosophical and intellectual, in the name of doing that, that doesn't mean we challenge devotional service, but we use that inquiry to dive deep into devotional service. So both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. So this is Shradadana Munaya, the first qualification mentioned in today's verse. After that, the next line is Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya, well equipped with Jnana and Vairagya. So this is also very interesting, Jnana and Vairagya, knowledge and renunciation. Coming after the previous verse, Vedanti Tat Tattva Vidhas. So these qualifications are applying to all of the spiritual seekers, the Brahmavadis, the Paramatmavadis, and the devotees. So all of those need to be equipped with Jnana and Vairagya, especially for the impersonalists and especially for the yogis. Jnana and Vairagya as a prerequisite for spiritual life are very essential. Prabhupada would often say of the Mayavadis and of Shankaracharya, let's see, Prabhupada said, just like Mayavadi sannyasi, impersonalist Shankaracharya, they put the first condition that you take up the renounced order of life first and then talk of spiritual advancement. So in Shankara Sampradaya, nobody is accepted as bona fide impersonalist unless he has accepted the renounced order of life. So for the impersonalists and for the yogis, this austerity, vairagya, renunciation is so essential. And also jnana, studying shastra, learning shastra at the feet of the guru, learning philosophy. All of this is very important for the jnanis and for the yogis. But what about for the devotees? For the devotees, it's a little bit different. We're cautioned by Srila Rupa Goswami in his in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in the very beginning, when he's describing pure devotional service, he says, Jnana Karmadya Navritam, that devotional service should not be covered by jnana, by the pursuit of knowledge, specifically speculative knowledge. It should not be covered by karma, by fruitive activities, and karmadi, and by other things like renunciation, dry renunciation. So how do we resolve this? Is jnana and vairagya, is it actually necessary? Is it a prerequisite? So devotional service isn't covered by these things, and the understanding, the proper understanding, is there in the Bhagavatam, just a few verses back. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatyasu Vairagyam Jnanam Chatarahaitukam, described that by rendering devotional service unto Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So this is the difference. For the jnanis and yogis, unless they become extremely renounced, and unless they study very deeply, they actually can't even begin to take up their process of spiritual advancement, what to speak of becoming perfect in it. But for the devotees, just by engaging in devotional service, jnana and vairagya automatically come. This is the difference. We've seen either live, those of us who have been to India have certainly seen this, the yogis, or most of them pseudo yogis, but whatever, surrounded by in a ring of fire in the summer. We've seen them meditating and with their matted locks, and they have the dried gobar chips all around them burning and a big fire going and sitting there, so-called meditating. So this kind of austerity is absolutely necessary for those other transcendentalists, but for the devotees, jnana and vairagya rather come from their process of devotional service. In one, it's a cause or a prerequisite, but for the devotees, it's a natural effect. Bhagavad Gita says, Tesham sattata yuktanam bhajatam priti porvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayanti te. If you're constantly devoted to Krishna, Tesham sattata yuktanam bhajatam priti porvakam, completely absorbed always in worshiping Krishna, dadami buddhi yogam tam, Krishna himself gives you the jnana. If you want jnana, Krishna gives it to you simply for those who are absorbed in worshiping him. And the next verse. And what's that knowledge? Jnanam, not speculative knowledge, but dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayanti te. Real knowledge, real jnana means the knowledge by which one can actually attain Krishna. So that comes from Krishna himself simply by being absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And Tesha mevanu kampartam aham agyana jam tama nasayam yatma bhavasto jnana dipena bhashvata. Jnana dipena, the lamp of knowledge. Krishna lights the lamp of knowledge. He shines the lamp of knowledge in the heart of the devotee because he's dwelling in the heart of the devotee. The yogis are seeking the Lord in the heart. But for the devotees, simply by worshiping Krishna, that Krishna in their heart shines the lamp of knowledge and destroys all of their ignorance without having to do pranayam and asana and this and that and all these other kinds of austerities. Simply by worshiping Krishna, automatically all of that comes. And again, yena mamupayanti te, jnana doesn't refer simply to academic knowledge, but actual knowledge which will lead us to Krishna. So this is how jnana and vairagya relate to the devotee. They naturally come to the devotee performing devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami further explains in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says, Jnana Vairagya yor bhakti prayesha payogita isat pratamam eveti nangatvam uchitam tayo. He explains jnana and vairagya are a little bit suitable for entering bhakti, being somewhat useful in the beginning of bhakti, but they are not considered angas of bhakti. Anga means they're not a limb, they're not an actual part of bhakti, but they can be a little bit useful in the beginning. A little bit useful, what does that mean? Just like when a brand new person comes to devotional service, or when people started coming to devotional service in the beginning of Prabhupada's movement. What was the jnana and vairagya that he gave them in the beginning? You stop eating meat. You stop taking drugs. You stop illicit sex. You stop gambling. This is vairagya. This is giving up. This is renunciation. But he didn't say you sit in the ring of fire. He didn't say you sit in the river in the water up to your neck in the winter. He just said this little prerequisite, you give up these gross sinful things. This is the only vairagya he requested in the beginning. And what was the knowledge? What was the jnana? Krishna is God, chant Hare Krishna. So a little bit helpful in the beginning. These little drops of jnana and vairagya are useful in the beginning. But by themselves, they're not actually angas of bhakti. They're not actually part of bhakti. Just like being just simple example, like being a vegetarian. Being a vegetarian, if you're going to take up devotional service, you really, really have to give up eating meat. But there are so many people, not so many people, a couple of percentage of people in the world who are giving up eating meat without devotional service. And that's nice, but spiritually it doesn't have much benefit on its own. So this is what Srila Rupa Goswami means. These things a little bit in the beginning are useful, but they're not actually part of bhakti. And then he goes on, Yad ube chitta katinya hetu prayasatam mate sukumara swabhavayam bhaktis tadetor inita. Because jnana and vairagya generally make the heart harsh, the authoritative devotees have concluded that bhakti alone, whose nature is very tender, is the cause of entering into bhakti. This is also the problem with too much cultivation of jnana and vairagya separate from devotional service. It makes the heart hard if you perform austerities. Just like look at these historical yogis like Vishwamitra and such, performing such austerities, but their heart is hard. Therefore, they lose their temper, they fall down, so many things are happening. We hear all these stories about Vishwamitra Muni in particular. And who's the other one, the angry Muni that got chased by Sudarshan Chakra?
Durvasa.
Durvasa, right. Thank you. Perfect example, Durvasa Muni. So Durvasa Muni was a great, great Muni. He was so austere and so full of Vedic knowledge, but his heart was so hard that he keeps on getting into trouble because his heart is so hard. So this is what Srila Rupa Goswami means. It makes the heart hard, too much separate cultivation of jnana and yoga. But the purpose of devotional service is to make the heart soft so that it's a suitable place to see and worship Krishna and for Krishna to reside and tadipena and to shine his light of knowledge into our heart. So the nature of devotional service is to soften the heart, but the nature of jnana and vairagya is to too much harden the heart. So therefore, devotional service is the only means of advancing. Not jnana and not vairagya, but rather jnana and vairagya naturally come. But what if we think, oh, but there's some benefit in jnana and vairagya? There is, and that benefit will automatically come to a devotee, because jnana and vairagya automatically come to a devotee. But Krishna explains in the 11th canto, in the Uddhava Gita, he's preaching to Uddhava. And Krishna explains, therefore, for a devotee engaged in my loving service with mind fixed on me, the cultivation of knowledge and renunciation is generally not the means of achieving the highest perfection within this world. Everything that can be achieved by fruitive activities, penance, knowledge, detachment, mystic yoga, charity, religious duties, and all other means of perfecting life is easily achieved by my devotee through loving service unto me. If somehow or other my devotee desires promotion to heaven, liberation, or residence in my abode, he easily achieves such benedictions. So don't think that you're missing out by not performing undue austerities or by becoming a big academic scholar. You're not missing out. Whatever you think can be gained by those things can very easily, even up to the stage of liberation, can be given by Krishna just through devotional service. So this is how we understand these things, jnana and vairagya, that they're important and they come from devotional service, but they are not causative of devotional service. So what is actual jnana? as I said in the beginning of this second chapter, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this chapter mainly focuses on this knowledge, sambandha abhideya prayojana. This is actual jnana, understanding who is Krishna, what is Krishna, understanding what is the process by which we attain Krishna, and practically engaging in that process and attaining the goal, which is prema pamartha mahan, that love of Krishna is the actual highest goal. This is real jnana. And if it's leading us to that and engaging us in that process, this is proper jnana, this is proper vairagya. But we don't need to seek those things out separately from devotional service. Many years ago, zillions of years, it seems like hundreds of years ago now, I was on traveling Sankirtan up in Maine in the winter for the Christmas marathon with a couple of other devotees, and our leader was His Holiness Niranjana Swami. Before he was a Swami, he was the Sankirtan leader, and we would go out in the van. We'd stay in a hotel. During the summer, we would just live in the van, but in the winter, it was cold. We'd stay in a hotel, and we'd go out during the day distributing books. And I remember when we came back every night, Niranjana Swami, on a little camp stove in the hotel, he would have cooked these, huge feasts of, beautiful, delicious prasad for all the devotees when we got back. And I remember saying, "Oh, Maharaj, you're cooking so opulent. We're all brahmacharis. This is not austere. This is not renounced. You're cooking all this delicious food and everything." And I always remember his response. He said that devotional service, just the performance of devotional service by itself, automatically contains just enough vairagya for us. We don't need to artificially add any additional vairagya or renunciation to it. Just by the process of devotional service, proper vairagya will come. So I always appreciated that explanation of his, that if we perform devotional service, vairagya will come, jnana will come. And of course, part of that devotional service includes rules and regulations about how we eat, how we live, which automatically gives vairagya. Like I said, our 4 regulative principles automatically provide some degree of vairagya. And we're also supposed to be constantly reading Srimad Bhagavatam, reading Prabhupada's books, hearing from devotees. That will give us proper jnana. So all of these things will come. And this is real renunciation, not artificial renunciation. Bhagavad Gita says, Sasanyasi cha yogicha na niragna na chakriya, that this is a sannyasi, not a person who wears a certain dress or gives up all duties and doesn't light any fire and doesn't do any work. Na niragnir na chakriya, a person who gives up fire and work, that's not a sannyasi, but a person who is fully engaged in devotional service. This is actual sannyasi, this is actual vairagya. Vairagya actually doesn't really mean renouncing or giving anything up. The word vairagya means etymologically viraga, means without attachment. So it's not actually a matter of giving things up, renouncing, oh, I'm pushing this away, I don't accept this, or pushing that away, I don't accept that. That's not actually vairagya. Vairagya means not being attached to this thing or that thing. Viraga, being without attachment. And how does that detachment from material life come? That comes by gaining an attachment to Krishna. That's how we become renounced, by becoming attached to Krishna. That's why His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, while preaching in Radha Kund one time, said that artha pravriti is more important than anartha nivriti. So anartha nivriti, we know, means giving up all unwanted things. But he said artha pravriti, accepting the desirable thing, is more important. Because if you accept the desirable thing, which is devotional service, then automatically gradually all of the anarthas will go away. And again, all of this comes automatically from devotional service. Bhakti pareshanu bhava viraktir anyatra chaisha trika eka kala prapadyamanasya yatasnatasyus tushti pushti kshud apayo nugasam. This is a very beautiful verse, very nice verse, also from the 11th canto. Bhakti pareshanu bhavo viraktir anyatra. So that means three things. Trika, Chaisha Trika, these three things: bhakti, devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, love of Krishna, and pareshanubhava, direct perception of Krishna himself, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and viraktir anyatra, and complete detachment from everything else. These three things, devotion to Krishna, seeing Krishna or experiencing Krishna, and renunciation of everything material, everything mundane. These three things automatically come at once in one stroke simply by the performance of devotional service. In the same way, prapadyamanasya yatasnatasus tushti pushti kshudapayo nugasam. In the same way, as if you're hungry, and if you're starving, and if you're malnourished, all you have to do is eat nourishing food. And if you eat nourishing food, then automatically, without any separate endeavor, you get the pleasure of eating, you get the nourishment of eating, and you get relief from your hunger. These three things automatically come by eating proper food. You don't have to make a separate endeavor besides eating. Besides eating, you don't have to do something else to get the pleasure of eating. And besides eating, you don't have to do something separate to get the nourishment from the food. And besides eating, you don't have to do something separate to get relief from your hunger. So similarly, by performing devotional service, you don't have to do something separate to become renounced. You simply perform devotional service and you become attached to Krishna. And when you become attached to Krishna, you automatically become renounced from this material world. Because that pleasure of devotional service is so strong that it negates the attraction to material life. Again, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the description of devotional service, Srila Rupa Goswami describes that even at the stage of sadhana bhakti, the pleasure of devotional service is so strong that one is no longer interested in karma, in fruit of the benefits, the happiness of fruitive activities, or the happiness of liberation, even at the stage of sadhana bhakti. And what to speak of at the stage of sadhana bhakti, at the stage of bhava bhakti, the pleasure of devotional service is described as moksha laguta krit, that the happiness of that bhakti is so strong that it positively mocks, it makes a joke of the happiness of liberation. And what to speak of at the stage of bhava bhakti, at the stage of prema bhakti, pure devotional service, where one has fully developed love of Krishna. The pleasure of that devotion is so strong that Sandrananda Visheshatma, I can't remember the entire Sanskrit verse, Sandrananda Visheshatma, that the pleasure of that kind of devotional service is so strong that one can no longer even perceive the happiness of material life or the happiness of liberation. He can't even perceive it. It doesn't even exist for him anymore. So this is actual renunciation. This is the real renunciation we want. In the beginning, yes, we need to force ourselves a little bit. I'm not going to eat meat, engage in illicit sex, take intoxicants, gamble, and so many other ways. We need to push ourselves and force ourselves a little bit, because performing these sinful activities is so detrimental to our devotional service that even sometimes by force in the beginning, we have to push ourselves to do this. But you could only grit your teeth and force yourselves for so long, for some weeks, for some months, for some years, or if someone's very determined, maybe for your whole life, you could restrain yourself like that. But this is not the actual method of devotional service. The actual method is to taste love of Krishna, to taste the happiness of devotional service so much that we're no longer even attracted to these pleasures of material life. This kind of renunciation will last, not will only will last, will exist eternally, because the pleasure of devotional service is only ever increasing. Whereas your grit and determination without devotional service to restrain yourself is not eternal and ever increasing, and sooner or later will fail. So we need to advance in devotional service. This is the actual way we renounce. The actual way that we cultivate knowledge is through this advancement of devotional service. And also going back to today's verse again, Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya. This word yuktaya means a practical acceptance. So the student practically accepts this jnana and vairagya, but this vairagya yuktaya also reminds us of the phrase yukta vairagya, or practical renunciation. This is also an important concept and an important verse that Prabhupada would offer and explain, that there's practical renunciation, yukta vairagya, and then there's impractical renunciation, or superficial, artificial renunciation, called Palgu Vairagya. This is again Srila Rupa Goswami's verse. Anasaktasya Vishaya Yataharamupa Yunjita Nirbande Krishna Sambande Yuktam Vairagyam Uchite Prapanchikataya Budya Hari Sambandha Vastuna Mumukshabi Parityago Vairagyam Palgu Katyate. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. So this is actual renunciation, that you're not attached to anything, but you understand everything's connection to Krishna. But on the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. So of a tyagi, a renunciate, who gives up everything, seemingly gives up everything, but doesn't understand these things connection to Krishna, is not as renounced as a devotee living in this world, seemingly engaged in the material world, but using everything in Krishna's service. This is the superior type of renunciation, yukta vairagya. And the other kind is palgu vairagya, or vain, or false, or superficial renunciation. So this is jnana and vairagya. And finally, very briefly, because time is running out, shruta griheteya. Devotional service has to be in line with scripture. Bhakti is received from the Vedic literature. Just like today's verse, we're learning about devotional service from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's all derived from the Vedic literature. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priya hitam chayat swadhyaya bhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate. Krishna is describing different types of austerity. Again, austerity, renunciation, vairagya. So what does he say about austerity of the tongue, austerity of speech? He says austerity of speech. Now, again, going back to the superficial renunciation, austerity of speech, you may think means monavrata. This is the superficial understanding. But Krishna explains, austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. So again, this is real renunciation and real jnana and real engagement in scripture. is whatever you speak has to be based on Vedic literature. Prabhupada says in the purport to that verse in Bhagavad Gita, he says, one should not talk nonsense. So this is the Mona Vrata for the devotee. It doesn't mean the devotee doesn't talk. It means the devotee does not speak nonsense. Again, one should not talk nonsense. The process of speaking in spiritual circles is to say something upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up what he is saying. At the same time, such talk should be very pleasurable to the ear. So the devotee, he speaks something and it's backed up by scripture. He would explain many times, but especially in the introduction to Ishopanishad, there's a transcript of a very nice talk by Srila Prabhupada about this principle, about Vedic epistemology. Epistemology means how do you know what you know? Where do you gain your knowledge from? And he explains that we generally gain our knowledge through pratyaksha, anuman, and shabda. Pratyaksha means our senses, direct sense perception. We look around us at the world, we experience the world, and we gain knowledge about the world around us. Next is anuman, logic and reason and hypothesis. Some things we can see, some things we cannot see directly. So by logic, we can infer some knowledge about the world around us, even if we don't see it directly. We can hypothesize, we can theorize about what the world around us is. And the final method is shabda. Some things we cannot directly perceive. Some things we cannot hypothesize or theorize perfectly, but by hearing from an authority, we can learn about the world around us. And the best kind of shabda is hearing from authorities. Specifically, shabda means hearing from the Vedic, not from the Vedic literatures. This is perfect shabda. Therefore, we accept as our guides in devotional service, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. But we also have to remember that the authority of the Guru is that he's learned in and following the Shastra. And the authority of Guru and the Sadhu, all the saintly devotees, is that they've made this deep study. Again, going back to Shraddha, the inquisitive sage, they've made this very deep study of scripture and philosophy and understood it and internalized it so well. So this is the Guru and Sadhu. They've studied the scripture so deeply. Therefore, that's what makes them Guru. That's what makes them Sadhu. And therefore, hearing from them is proper. Their shabda is worthwhile. So actually hearing from the scripture is the basis of all authority, even the authority of Guru and the authority of Sadhu. The Guru and the Sadhu are tested that they're proper by their adherence to scripture. So this is the importance of hearing from scripture in devotional service. And if one's trying to perform devotional service, but doesn't understand or doesn't accept the scriptural authority, then that's a problem. Actually, Prabhupada says, he's referring to this verse in today's purport. Let me see if I could quickly find that. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. So those who know this verse will understand Prabhupada is making a reference to this shloka. Shruti Smriti Puranadi Panchayat Vidim Vina Upatyaeva Kalpit. Akaintaki Harer Bhakti Utpatayeva Kalpite. That Shruti Smriti Puranadi devotional service has to be in line with Shruti, Smriti, Puranas, and the Panchayat literatures, all of the Vedic literatures, the Vedas and literature in pursuit of the Vedic version. And if not, Akaintaki Harer Bhakti Utpatayeva Kalpite. Then if you try to perform devotional service without that guidance and without that authority, then that's not devotional service. It's rather a disturbance in society and a disturbance in the process of devotional service. So we must accept as our prime authority the scriptures and study Srimad Bhagavatam and study Prabhupada's books. That doesn't mean we neglect Guru and Shastra. Rather, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra are one in a sense. The Shastra is the original authority, but all of them are proper Shabda. Yasya Deve Parabhaktir Yata Deve Tata Guru Tasyaiti Katita Yarta Prakashante Mahatmana. As understanding Guru and Sadhu has to be predicated upon our understanding of Shastra. At the same time, our understanding of Shastra has to be predicated upon our understanding and surrender to Guru and Sadhu. Yasya Deve Parabhaktir Yata Deve Tata Guru. That those who worship Krishna and those who worship the sadhus and the devotees and their spiritual master, for those persons, the actual import of Vedic knowledge is revealed to them and not otherwise. This is coming up next week in our Bhagavat morning class. Nasta praisha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatu tamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. That devotional service comes from nityam bhagavata sevaya. And Prabhupada explains that Bhagavata means Bhagavatas are the devotees, and Bhagavata means the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam. So he explains in the purport there are two types of Bhagavatas, namely the book Bhagavata and the devotee Bhagavata. Both the Bhagavatas are competent remedies, and both of them, or either of them, can be good enough to eliminate the obstacles. A devotee Bhagavata is as good as the book Bhagavata, because the devotee Bhagavata leads his life in terms of the book Bhagavata. And the book Bhagavata is full of information about the personality of Godhead and his pure devotees who are also Bhagavatas. Bhagavata book and person are identical. So, capsule summary is that the devotee has to have faith, and that faith means a deep inquisitiveness and deep study and deep understanding of the process of devotional service. He needs to develop his jnana, his knowledge. He needs to develop his renunciation of the material world, which is mainly accomplished through the engagement of devotional service, which gives one the pleasure and the experience of loving Krishna, and he'll automatically develop full understanding of Krishna and full renunciation from this material world. And all of this is based on our understanding and study of the Vedic revelation. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. If there's any questions or comments or discussion, we can do that now. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if that class went on a little bit too long.
Please don't be sorry. And that was very informative. I learned a lot in this class about the nature of bhakti in relationship to jnana and vairagya. In fact, I feel I could keep listening if you have more to give.
Actually, in my preparation for this, my study of this, I actually made like 10 times more notes on it than I could have ever used in this class, because it really is a fascinating topic, and it's part of a lot of Prabhupada's discussion of devotional service.
Thank you very much, Charya Prabhu. I very, very much appreciate this, your class, your talk today. It seems like we have Mother Sudevi. She has her hand up.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so you are talking about the three kind of devotees in the is Madhyama and Uttama. And then in the end, you said that to make your faith strong, you should study the scriptures. And so is that the study make your faith strong, or just whatever devotional service you're doing? And how do you get to the stage of having that strong faith?
It's both, because by studying, if you read a verse, Krishna says, "I dwelling in your heart destroys ignorance with the lamp of knowledge." So in one sense, it's just an ordinary transmission of a fact. Okay, you read that, and now I know, quote unquote, know that Krishna is in my heart and he'll destroy my ignorance with the lamp of knowledge. So that's one level. But the other level is a life of devotional service, which allows that theoretical knowledge that Krishna is in your heart to sink deeply within you, that you understand it more deeply and eventually fully realize it. Prabhupada would talk about jnana and vigyan, that there's theoretical knowledge and realized knowledge. So for the full realization, both are necessary. We read, we study, we discuss philosophy, we do all these things. And we also have a life of devotional service. And the combination, and actually the reading, just sitting down and reading the Bhagavatam, even superficially, that is itself an act of devotional service. Prabhupada said, read every day. Prabhupada said, have class every day. So just doing that is an act of devotional service. And when you accompany it with a full life of devotional service, then it sinks very deeply into you. And then your faith and your understanding becomes so solid. So it's both of those. It's all of those things together, a life of devotional service, and also cultivating to some degree, according to our ability, according to our interest, and an intellectual life of study of Bhagavatam also. Is that all right?
So what if someone doesn't study but just do whatever as a devotional service? Or what would you say? Is it actually
well,
necessary?
if someone doesn't study, if someone is not reading Bhagavatam or is not reading Prabhupada's books, then that's not good. That means they're neglecting the order of the spiritual master. And if someone's neglecting the order of the spiritual master, that's one of the offenses. And what's that? Bahu Janma Karyari Shravana Kirtana. What's that verse?
Bahu Janma Kare Sari Savana Kirtan Tabatuna Pai Krishna Premadana.
Hare Premadan. That one could perform devotional service for many lives and not get love of Krishna if they're neglecting the order of the spiritual master. So if you're not reading and not studying, that's a fault in your devotional service. It doesn't mean everyone has to study and read or even understand to the same degree. I think the story came up on Friday about the Lord Chaitanya met the Brahmin who was reading Bhagavad Gita every day, but the book was upside down. Was that story told on Friday?
Thursday.
On Thursday, yes, on Thursday. So here's a person, you could say, oh, he doesn't understand anything. He's not even reading. The book is upside down. But he's following the order of the spiritual master. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya said, you have actually understood Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. Or there's another quote from Srila Prabhupada. I don't have it handy, but he said, you simply sit in the temple, and whenever there's some class, you sit and hear. He said, even if you don't understand, you just sit in the temple and you hear. And then he said, understanding is not very important. You simply sit and hear. So what does he mean by that? Understanding is not very important. He means that that intellectual understanding by itself is not our goal. Our understanding is to hear the scripture, follow the order of the spiritual master, and then jnana and vairagya will automatically come within the heart. So if we do have a brain to understand, then we should apply that brain power to understand to whatever degree we can whatever degree we're able to, which is always going to be insufficient on its own, the brain power, but we're applying, again, yukta vairagya. Yukta vairagya means you have some facility and you engage it in Krishna's service. So if you have a very small amount of brain, like we all do, relatively speaking, we have very small brains, tiny brains. One devotee used to talk about pea brains, have a little pea brain. So we have our little pea brain, but we apply our tiny little pea brain to understanding Krishna, to understanding devotional service in the scripture. This is our yukta vairagya, that whatever we have, or if we have big brain, then we apply that to understanding Krishna and devotional service. And if we have a little brain or we have a big brain, so-called, that's not the qualification. The qualification is, are we applying it to understanding devotional service? So this is the point. Not that a devotee gives up studying, but it's not simply about intellectual achievement or academic achievement. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Mother Vidyavali has her hand up, and then after her, Mother Vatsala.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you very much for the nice speech. Like a foreign devotee like me, I could understand a lot of things today. I think devotional service about Krishna, what you said, those three steps, devotion, Krishna, and seeing Krishna, experiencing Krishna. And another thing is austerity of speech. Really, speak. One should not talk nonsense, and one should talk very pleasurable to ear. That is one thing I like, Prabhu. Yes. And the other one is pratyaksha.
I'm going to briefly interrupt you there. That topic is very interesting.
Yes.
And if you have the Veda base, or if you have Prabhupada's letters, there's a letter from Srila Prabhupada to Sumati Morarji, where he discusses this principle very deeply, and it's very fascinating. I would recommend that.
Thank you, Prabhu. And the other one is, Party Krishna, Pratyaksha Krishna and Anumana, Pratyaksha and Anumana and Shabda. Those three things also, it's very, very interesting for me. And I really enjoyed this whole thing, Prabhu. Class is very good. And for me, understanding that from lower side, understanding, it is a simple, it's very good, nicely you explained today. I'm really thankful. Thank you very much. Our God is Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Pranam.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much for the lecture. Prabhu, I don't have any knowledge about anything, but I have a blind faith in your Guru, that is Srila Prabhupada. I think he's the greatest Guru for me. And just having a blind faith in Guru, can we solve all the problems? We don't have to do anything else. Just like I don't have any knowledge at all in any of the scriptures or anything. Can we go by that and improve ourselves in our service to God? I think Krishna guides you. Krishna is the greatest gift in your life. And Srila Prabhupada's books are the greatest gift in your life. So if we have that blind faith, can we pursue our goal to have love for Krishna? Just these two things in your life, or just even having the blind faith? Can we go across and cross the ocean of this misery in our life? Can we do that, please? Can you explain that?
Yes, that's a very, very interesting question. At least one time Prabhupada said about blind faith, that he said, if you have blind faith, but blind faith in the right thing, then you'll be successful. The danger of blind faith is that because the basis of it may not be strong, you may have blind faith in this thing, or you may have blind faith in that thing or the other thing. But he did say that if you have blind faith in the right thing, in Prabhupada and Prabhupada's instructions in devotional service, then yes, you can absolutely attain perfection. But I'll also say that you're saying about yourself that you have no knowledge and you just have blind faith. But I think you're wrong. I think that you have a lot of understanding, and that your faith is actually not so blind. You understand a little bit to some, I don't know, I can't see in your head or in your heart, but I think you have some understanding of actually how great Srila Prabhupada is. You read and hear Srimad Bhagavatam. That means that your faith is actually not blind. You should maybe give yourself more credit than you are, that you do have some understanding, some appreciation, some depth of understanding of Prabhupada's life, of Prabhupada's instructions, and Prabhupada's devotional service. If you actually have blind faith in devotional service, it actually won't remain blind faith for long. Just like I was talking about the 3 types of devotees who come to devotional service, that the Kanishta Adhikari, that their Shraddha is very soft and very weak, and they basically have blind faith. But what happens is that such a person, if they stick to devotional service, their blind faith will not be blind faith anymore. They'll gain strength of understanding. They'll gain strength of belief and strength of intellect by performing devotional service. So blind faith will absolutely take you to the highest level of devotional service in all perfection, but it also won't remain blind. Is that all right?
Okay, thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. Thanks for the class.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I don't see any more hands up.
Okay.
Just
Thank you
pause
very
for a
much,
second.
everybody. There's
Pause
some
for a second to see
announcements.
if there are no more questions, we'll just give a few announcements real quick. Today's Sunday. Our Bhagavad Gita presentation tonight will be given by His Grace Kaivalya Prabhu. We're studying the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and the topic is on sacrifice. So the importance and benefits of sacrifice. So please tune into that at 5 o'clock. Now I do want to say that things are it appears things are beginning to change with regards to the restrictions on COVID. We can almost say that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, or the end is near. But we're not going to rush back into this prematurely. So in Philadelphia, they're going to be opening a little bit later than, say, the rest of the state is. So being that we're in Philadelphia, we're going to comply with the Philadelphia rules and regulations. I don't think Philadelphia is going to be too much further behind than everybody else, but we haven't officially kind of released or planned anything out, but I think we'll see in the next within the next month, at the temple, gradually things will start to open up, and hopefully throughout the summer we'll see the continuance of being able to gather and perform kirtan together, come and hear classes together, and maybe even be able to honor prasadam together. So that is the goal.
And to facilitate that, everyone go out and get vaccinated.
Yes, thank you, Acharya Prabhu. Because doing that will help the process. So anyway, just wanted to let you know that we're going to be fielding a lot of questions, because there's over the week there's been a lot of news that's been released. So just wanted to let the devotees know that we're not there yet. So today when you come, don't throw your mask off and start hugging everybody. So anyway, we hope to see you tonight. Every schedule hasn't been changed. Same thing, 11:30 to 12:30. Today darshan will be open, and then also at 6 o'clock to 7:15. One last thing I'll mention. This week, there's going to be some service, care and maintenance done to the deities. We have we're very fortunate to have an expert painter, deity painter coming from Alachua. So they'll be doing some work on the and maintenance of the deities. So darshan will be limited. So if you come and you only see that the Lord Jagannath is giving his darshan, you'll know what is happening.
Hare Krishna, Drona Prabhu.
Yes, Hare Krishna, Mother Devi.
I could not hear who is giving class. I don't know if it's my internet or even during the class, there was some kind of, I cannot really hear well. It's like some of the words my husband was saying, I didn't really could hear the complete sentence. Probably it's my internet. I don't know if anybody else experienced it. So who is giving class today?
Today is Kaivalya Prabhu.
Okay. I don't know if anybody also had some problem with a connection. It's just my connection. I'm just today starting to use my internet for the first time. So I don't know. It's just me.
Yeah, I had
It was
some
clear
light
on my end.
problems. I had slight issues
No,
with that.
we didn't
was
have
going
it. I
on and
didn't
off.
have any.
We didn't have any problems.
We didn't have any problem.
Sometimes Acharya Prabhu had red bars, so maybe I noticed that a couple of times he had red bars, and so it may have been between both of your internets, but we didn't have any.
We didn't have any problem.
I don't know, maybe Philadelphia something. I don't know, Verizon something.
There we
Oh,
go.
yeah. I said my internet is not all the way there yet. I just want to check. Like I said, today is the first time listening to the class. Okay, thank you, devotees. Hare Krishna.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Have a wonderful
Thank
Krishna
you.
conscious day.
You
And
too.
thank
Have
you
a nice
again,
day.
Acharya Prabhu. Wonderful,
Panchayat,
wonderful.
Thanks a lot.
Vancha
Have a good day.
Kalasya
Bye-bye.
Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitinam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Namo
Namo
Namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare